Hello, everyone. My name is David Okinwa from Nigeria, and I'm a campaign coordinator at Mockup. Welcome to all our delegates joining on Zoom and our public viewers on YouTube. And welcome to our Quality Climate Education panel. This is going to be a really exciting panel with international organizations, academics, and youth activists exploring what climate education means to them and what needs to be done domestically and internationally to achieve it. Before I introduce you to our brilliant speakers, I would want to remind you of a couple bits of important information. So we have live interpretation for English, Spanish, and French in our session today. This session will be in English, so if you need translation into Spanish or French, please join an interpretation channel by clicking on the interpretation mode and choosing the language you would like to hear. Please follow the guidance on the screen for better sound quality. You can mute the original audio. Speakers, please remember to speak slowly and clearly and avoid regional vocabulary or acronyms and jargons where possible. Thank you to our team of interpreters from common languages. We also have a team available for technical support throughout the event. So please send a message via the chat box or the delegate WhatsApp group if you need assistance. Those providing support, we have technical support in their Zoom name. So I'll give some time for delegates to join the relevant language channel. So you can join the French channel or the Spanish channel. Okay. I'd now like to introduce our speakers for this panel, who will be discussing their perspectives on quality climate education. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Jennifer Ulrich, Research, Policy, and Advocacy Coordinator at Education International. We are joined by Dr. Christine Haggis, postdoctoral scholar with the Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education, MECCE project, Laura Veronica Munoz, an ecofeminist climate organizer and communicator from the Colombia Eastern Andes, and Osman Diaby, the lead youth empowerment specialist at the Islamic Development Bank. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Sona Raghuvanshi, the lead organizer for Economies for Future at Rethinking Economies, was unable to join us today due to extenuating circumstances. Rethinking Economics is an international network of students and recent graduates building a better economics for the classroom with the support of academic allies. We recommend you to have a look at the organization in your own time to read up on the amazing work they do. Thank you all for joining us. We will shortly pass to the speakers to introduce themselves and share a short reflection each on climate education. And then we will move on to answer some questions that have been pre-submitted by our delegates. This is a vital section as it directly addresses the theme of the Mock Education Minister Summit, which is about quality climate education. So I encourage you to listen attentively, get your notepads, and jot some points down. So firstly, we'll hear from Jennifer Ulrich, the Research, Policy, and Advocacy Coordinator at Education International. Education International is a global union federation that represents organizations of teachers and other education employees. It is the world's largest sectoral organization of unions. And Jennifer Ulrich, you can go ahead now to introduce yourself and share some reflections.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to be part of this mock COP. I hope you can hear me okay. I'll try not to speak
Loud and clear.
Yes? Good. Okay, so yes, as you've said, so EI, we're an organization which represents teachers unions around the world, and together with our together with 383 member organizations, we actually represent over 32 million teachers and education support personnel as well in 178 countries and territories. So we represent the teaching profession at the global level. The teachers really recognize the urgency of transforming education systems to respond to the climate crisis. I mean, of course, already students, teachers and communities, especially girls, people with disabilities, Indigenous peoples, and those in countries who have contributed the least to causing climate change, are being severely impacted by climate change. And that's threatening students' right to quality education and also threatening teachers' right to decent working conditions. Just this week, we've seen in Hawaii the absolute devastation from wildfires. Schools were closed just days after opening for the school year, and schools are being used as makeshift evacuation centres, and teachers are, of course, involved in the disaster response. So we see climate change impacting communities almost on a daily basis. And teachers know that no matter where you are, the climate emergency is at your doorstep. Mandated by our decision-making body at the global level, our World Congress, in 2021, EI launched the Teach the Planet campaign. So this is a campaign that's calling for immediate reforms to ensure that education systems all over the world are fit for purpose in the context of the climate emergency. So teachers published a manifesto. This outlines a vision where quality climate change education is considered an integral element of a quality education and is provided for every student all over the world. So this manifesto from the teaching profession outlines a few key elements of quality climate change education. So this manifesto talks about the need for equipping students with skills and knowledge needed to tackle climate change, to adapt to uncertainties, and to take part in building a more sustainable future. It also outlines that quality climate change education should be based on the most up-to-date science, but also considering the political, economic, social dimensions of climate change, that it must be gender responsive, that it promotes a multicultural vision and recognizes Indigenous knowledge, and it centers climate justice and fosters civic engagement, critical thinking, and of course, climate action. So these are just a few elements of what quality climate change education is for teachers. The manifesto also lays out the type of system change that we need for this to happen. So this includes ensuring that all education institutions are safe, that they're climate proof, and that they're sustainable. It involves integrating climate education into teacher training programs for all teachers, no matter if they're a maths teacher, a science teacher, or any other type of teacher, right from elementary school to higher education. It involves providing teachers with robust, free and accessible professional development. It also means giving all teachers access to quality, relevant and teaching and learning materials that are designed actually in collaboration with educators through their unions. It involves guaranteeing a just transition in the education sector. So that means safeguarding decent working conditions for teachers in the context of worsening climate impacts and protecting their labour rights, promoting their well-being and ensuring that their workload is manageable as we have a transition. It also involves ensuring climate education policy is developed with teachers, their unions, but also with students, with the local communities and with Indigenous peoples. And finally, it involves ensuring that all of this is financed. So none of this is possible. We cannot have system change unless we have adequate public funding for education. So EI and our member organizations have been campaigning at the national and international levels for the implementation of all of these policy changes. Teachers are really willing to play their role in this struggle. We see the importance of protecting both the kind of current and future generations and the need to sustain our planet. But there are obstacles. So for teachers especially, we've found that teachers really want to teach about climate change, but they don't feel confident doing it because there isn't an enabling conditions for them to do it. So we actually did a survey with UNESCO, and a survey of over 60,000 teachers found that 91% of those teachers believed it was important to teach about climate change, but only 40% felt confident to teach about it. They talked about barriers like the fact it wasn't in the curriculum, they didn't have the teaching and learning materials for it, they didn't have the training, or they didn't have the time. Some teacher unions now are kind of taking up the responsibility and supporting their members by offering seminars, peer-to-peer learning opportunities and materials as well for their members. So there's a long way to go. I'm looking forward to the discussion and to hear from the other panelists as well. But teachers really believe that quality climate change education is not just something that's a nice to have, it's something that we need, and it should be a right for every student. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. The last statement, that it's not a nice to have, but something we need, that is climate education. And the Teach the Planet project sounds like a very great project. And while we are speaking, a lot of the characteristics of quality climate education, according to the teachers, really aligns with the drafts of the statements, the unified statement on climate education that the youths have. And we are really glad to have you here. Thank you very much for joining. So we will now hear from Dr. Christine Haggis, who is doctoral scholar with the Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education MECCE project. The MECCE project is an ambitious international research partnership of over 100 leading scholars and agencies. Their goal is to advance global climate literacy and action through improving the quality and quantity of climate change education, training, and public awareness. Thank you very much, Christine, for joining us. You can speak now.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was Nelson Mandela who said that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And like Mandela, I believe in the power of education, and it is this belief that has driven me to devote my life to climate change education research. Growing up in the Southern United States, never once in my primary or secondary education were the words climate change mentioned, not once. It was only during my undergraduate studies that I realized it was not if, but when the world would be affected by climate change. When I began believing in and taking action on climate change, it was not an understanding of climate science that convinced me. Instead, I was convinced through the relationships formed, the conversations had, and the support shared with several peers who acknowledged the reality of climate change. For me, social engagement on the topic came first. Knowledge and action came later. Early climate communication and education often assumed that learning about climate change would lead to greater action to solve the climate crisis. Research suggests, however, that climate communication and education is more impactful when it is holistic, responsive to cultural and regional concerns, and engages with climate justice and Indigenous knowledges. While knowledge is important, climate communication and education should also teach skills to support systemic and individual climate action and provide socio-emotional skills to build resilience and enable the collaboration needed to take action together. Tailoring climate communication and education initiatives and communications to specific audiences also encourages climate action. As the climate crisis is made worse by and contributes to inequality, climate communication and education should also engage with climate justice. This means addressing climate injustice in climate communication and education, as well as ensuring the contributions of climate vulnerable communities are included in climate communication and education. As a postdoctoral scholar with the Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education, or MECE project, I have worked on a number of projects related to quality climate communication and education. My work with the MECE project is driven by the desire to ensure that no other student leaves their primary, secondary, or higher education without hearing the words climate change, and that they leave with the social and emotional resiliency to engage with the topic and the confidence that they know what actions need to be taken by individuals, communities, and nations. The MECE project is an international research project of over 100 leading scholars and agencies. Our goal is to advance global climate literacy and action through improving the quality and quantity of climate change education, training, public awareness, public access to information, public participation, and international cooperation. The MECE project is supporting this transformation through 3 intersecting axes of research activity. The first axis involves increasing climate communication and education quality through knowledge synthesis studies, at least 80 country profiles, and at least 30 case studies. The work on our country profiles is done in partnership with the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report. The country profiles provide an overview of how countries are engaging with climate communication and education in a variety of contexts, including in relation to laws, policies, curriculum, teacher training, practices, and monitoring and evaluation. Our case studies explore the impacts of quality climate communication and education at varying levels, including on the participants, local policy environments, and across and between national contexts. The vast majority of the case studies funded to date are located in the Global South and are engaging with climate justice. The second axis of the MECE project involves increasing the quantity of quality climate communication and education. This includes developing new global indicators to enable national and intergovernmental benchmarking and target setting. Open access, non-self-reported, high-quality data sources form the foundation of the indicators. We have currently published 9 global indicators of quality climate communication and education. The third axis involves making sure the research is useful and used. This includes sharing and collaborating on this work with key stakeholders such as youth through intergovernmental engagement, providing access to all project data on our interactive data platform and the Global Climate Communication and Education blog. There are a variety of ways youth can learn about and get involved in our work. For instance, we recently hosted the Action for Climate Empowerment Academy with national focal points and negotiators, at which 15 youth delegates were also in attendance. At the Academy, participants learned skills to monitor, evaluate, and report on climate communication and education. We also have regional hubs, which are networking forums for sharing regionally and culturally relevant knowledge related to monitoring, evaluating, and reporting on climate communication and education. There are also a number of resources on our website, including our interactive data platform, our global blog, and digital library. We look forward to connecting with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, for that presentation, and thank you for joining us. So just like I did not hear about climate change during my primary and secondary school, I heard it from a friend during my university days, and I'm glad that MECCE is working towards ensuring that no student leave their primary and secondary education without having heard about climate change. So for our delegates and those joining, you can head on to the MECCE website to see the resources that they have for youth and the researches that have been done with MECCE. All right, so now we will hear from Usman Dabi. lead youth empowerment specialist at the Islamic Development Bank. The Islamic Development Bank is a multilateral development finance institution that is focused on Islamic finance on infrastructure development and located in Saudi Arabia. Thank you for joining us, Usman, and you can speak now.
Thank you, David, and my participating colleagues. I am deeply honored and privileged to be part of this esteemed panel on quality climate education, representing the Islamic Development Bank and its firm commitment to promoting and strengthening climate actions in our member countries, with a precise focus on empowering youth. The bank serves 57 member countries globally, and with over 20% of the population being youth on average. Their involvement is essential. The challenge posed by climate change are undeniably one of the defining issues of our time, demanding urgent and collective action from all corners of the globe. At Islamic Development Bank, we passionately recognize the essential role that education plays in shaping a resilient and sustainable future for our planet. Quality climate education transcends the traditional boundaries of knowledge dissemination. It is about nurturing a generation of informed, engaged, and empowered individuals who can lead transformative change in their communities. At the ISDB mission lies a firm dedication to empowering the youth of our member countries as the champions of climate action. We firmly believe that young people are not mere beneficiaries, but indispensable agents of change in the fight against climate change. By investing in their education and providing them with necessary tools and knowledge, we unleash their potential to become advocates, innovators, and leaders in global efforts to address climate changes. The Islamic Development Bank holds a strategic commitment to addressing challenges posed by climate change through substantial climate financing efforts. This emphasizes climate change financing is a core objective of the institution, reflecting its dedication to supporting member countries in their adaptation efforts. In year 2021, the IDB demonstrates its strong dedication to climate financing by allocating a notable 35% of its total commitment toward projects aimed at climate adaptation. This significant allocation was channeled across various sectors, underscoring the institution's holistic approach to addressing the impacts of climate change. Over the past 5 years, the IDB's average commitment to climate adaptation has consistently been around 55% of its total climate action commitments. This steady commitment showcases the institution's consistent focus on fostering resilience and adaptations among its member countries. Moreover, Islamic Development Bank recognized the paramount importance of providing our youth with practical opportunities to engage directly with climate solutions. Our programs facilitate hands-on learning experience, encouraging young people to actively participate in community-based projects that address climate issues head-on. For example, we work on formulating a new program focusing on youth leadership, which aims to educate young people about sustainable development issues in general and climate action in particular. This is because climate change is a principal issue that is already impacting young people negatively and will continue to be a significant change in their future. By empowering them through such youth leadership and education programs, we are increasing their awareness, but also working towards making them part of the solution. In the spirit of collaboration and shared knowledge, IDB has been fostering partnerships and facilitating knowledge sharing among member countries. Through our commitments to cultivating a collaborative ecosystem, we leverage the collective expertise and experience of our diverse member nations to strengthening climate education initiatives on a broader scale. We are proud to highlight one such partnership with the International Labour Organization, where we will be concluding our second challenge call on green skilling in post-crisis situation, which aims to equip young people with the skills, resources, and opportunities they need to succeed in today's rapidly changing world. Additionally, we are actively engaged in promoting climate resilience and environmental sustainability, ensuring a just transition for youth as well as segments of the population. Moreover, we are working with partners like UNDP, Generation Unlimited, GGGI, and OIC, just to name a few, to identify the best ways to strengthening entrepreneurial ecosystem for youth and women, while also devising programs to strengthening these ecosystems, so that more youth have the skills and resources they need to succeed in this new era. In conclusion, ISDB remains passionate about our commitment to advancing quality climate education in our member countries. We firmly believe that empowering our youth with knowledge, skills, and opportunities creates a ripple effect that cascades positive change throughout our societies. As we collectively confront the challenges of climate change, we acknowledge the immense potential of our youth to be the drivers of a sustainable and climate resilient future. I extend my heartfelt gratitude for providing me with this platform to share IDB's firm commitment to climate action and youth empowerment through quality climate educations. I eagerly anticipate fruitful discussion with my fellow panelists and look forward to exploring innovative ways to further strengthen our efforts. Thank you for all this attention and support.
Thank you very much, Usman. And it's really great to hear the many initiatives on both climate change and climate education that the Islamic Development Bank is financing. And that's really good to hear, because it involves a lot of finance, like the previous speakers have said. And also, you mentioned that youths are not just beneficiaries, but change agents. And I totally agree with that. We are not just beneficiaries, but we're also change agents. And when we are trained and empowered, we'll be able to create more change. Thank you very much for joining us, Usman. And finally, we hear from Laura Veronica, an ecofeminist climate organizer and communicator from the Colombia Eastern Andes. So, Laura, you can go ahead now.
Yeah, hi. I prepared a little presentation. I'm gonna share a screen. Oh, but I cannot share a screen.
Oh, sure. The technical support will allow you to share screen now. You can go ahead once they allow you.
Okay, I'm gonna introduce myself a bit. I'm Laura. I'm from Colombia. I'm from the Andes. Currently in London because I just finished a master education, gender and international development in UCL. Okay, I have now permission. So I want to share a bit about I have 5 minutes. So I don't will develop much. This was basically all the elements that my dissertation had. I put it in a potato plant, organized because it was very difficult for me. It was the first research that I did, but it basically studies how the Western hegemonic education has impacted the climate agency of the communities that I come from, the native peasant from the Andes, specifically from the Altiplano Cundiboyacense, the Cundiboyacense Highlands. right here, and how has also affected not only in the climate agency, but also in the community identity. And when I talked about quality of education, I will say, and that's actually that also Mockup has, is a very contextualized education, which differentiates a lot from the Western hegemonic education, because it is like kind of like an universal and like very generalizing education, I will say. And like some of the elements of this kind of education, the Western hegemonic education, is like they teach you under like market-oriented approaches. It had like a very modernizing, also like widening dynamic underneath. It is very, very individualistic. It is very based on numbers and like the reason, the logic of the things. So it is crazy, because I remember that during the master, they differentiate the formal and informal education, and informal education is all related like to arts and culture. And like, for example, in Colombia, music and dancing is like what some people make their living, but that would be like informal. And at the same time, it is very like it is. I also based a lot in the OECD, especially the PISA assessments, because the PISA assessment basically it follows the human capital theory, which is the Western hegemonic education. So like basing all that those basic terms. So yeah, like for example, I started to like discover, like bringing back all the education about the history of the community that I come from. And I found, for example, that there were some guides by like some like international organizations and like foundations like the Rockefeller that made like education and like health guides that kind of like trying to put this human capital theory, like they think about like you need to work in order like to serve like the market system, and like these are kind of like some examples that I found, but like this is in Spanish. But for example, this is said like el instrumento de trabajo produce riqueza cuando lo manejan vigorosas y manos vigorosas y educadas, which says like the tool of work will generate wealth when it is used by healthy and educated hands. And this one was like for women, which is like, this was an education guide for like native peasants. This says, la madre debe alimentar a su hija, es obligación impuesta por la naturaleza. The mother must feed their child, is an obligation imposed by nature. So it was like very oriented, like just to serve other people and like to take care of ourselves. And actually in these kind of campaigns also, it was very, very stigmatized, like our culture, like for example, the drinks made by corn are like very traditional drinks, or like clothes as well. And even there were like some politicians and like politicians from the city that tried to like even ban, and like they did like whole campaign saying that if we drink those kind of like traditional drinks, like you will be like a donkey, kind of like a stupid and like very like brutal person. I don't know how to say it. And this was kind of like the understanding of like this education, that it has changed a bit, but it is still alive today. And this is if we take an Indian from the Cundinamarca and compare him with an educated person from Boston, we will have before us our starting point and our goal. So basically that was education, and that is kind of be like they want just to modernize and like make people like westernized, just like like with the market-oriented aims. I would love to talk more, but I know that we don't have time. Also, like doing all these a kind of research, I wanted to also talk about like Clara Tocarruncho, that is she's an ancestor of Convita that like led a huge riot during the Andean Revolution at the end of like during 1770, 80. And like, for example, that's an information that we don't have. Like that is information that I found, that friend found, and like she knows that I have like the same Convital, the little town and the last name, and she sent that to me. But like, for example, neither my family nor no one in the town or like in high school, we learned about like this woman that was very, very important for like the Colombian independence, and it was not named at all. We know about the like Spanish people or like the Spanish people born in Latin America that like led the independence, but we don't learn about like the Black and indigenous leaders that also were part of it. So yeah, like these were some conclusions that I wanted to give. But yeah, like basically I will say that quality of education first is contextualized, but also it doesn't, like it incentivizes kind of like community dynamics. It doesn't rupture like it has been done by the Western hegemonic education. It gives you like proud to be of who you are, because that's something that Western education hasn't done. Because they wanted to be something else that we aren't. Also, one of the things, for example, about like the indicators of SDGs in terms of gender is that they're like very static. I will say that they need to improve. They need to see the problem more in a holistic way, because they see, like, for example, in gender, they only have like women and men, but they don't consider like a third, like non-binary identities. And at the same time, those gender aren't mixed with other criteria like race or like other criteria that need to be taken into account. Another thing is like the climate crisis is not a new crisis. This has been happening for a long time. We're just living like a coalition of many crises that have been like waiting, and like like a snowball. And another thing is like a quality of education. It will be not only local and contextualized, but also like taking into account the reality. One of the things that I found with my family during this dissertation is like at the end, for example, for native peasants, they also need to understand the market. They also need these tools, like financial tools, that they don't give us because they stay like for certain universities or certain schools. And it is also imperative, like local communities have this financial system in order to understand and tackle and like work within, because that's the system and the society we live. But yeah, I think that I tried to spoke and like give everything. Hope it was understood, because it was a lot of topics, a lot of information, but yeah, that will be on my side.
Thank you very much, Laura, for that wonderful presentation. Thanks a lot. And then one of the things you mentioned, that tool of work regenerates wealth, and that's really great. When these things are used by educated hand, education empowers us and make us achieve more with the resources we have. Thank you very much, Laura. And thanks to all our speakers for that insightful introduction. it's good to have such a range of voices and such different faiths. And delegates have submitted. Yeah. So I'm going to answer some questions now that our delegates have submitted before now, and I would love to hear your opinions on these questions. The first, what are the possible obstacles to achieving quality climate education globally, and how can we work to overcome them, both locally and internationally? So I'd like Jennifer to speak on this first. What are the possible obstacles to achieving quality climate education globally, and how can we work to overcome them, both locally and internationally?
Sure. So, yeah, there are multiple obstacles. So some that the teachers see are limited financing for adapting education systems to be climate smart and to provide quality climate change education. We see a lack of political will from some governments to implement reforms. We see a lack of cross-ministerial coordination, and outside the education sector, often a lack of recognition of the important role that education actually has in addressing the climate crisis. So yeah, I did some research actually into this. So we analysed countries' nationally determined contributions to their policy plans to respond to climate change, and we found that actually only 40 out of 133 nationally determined contributions mentioned climate change education at all. And of these, only 12 mentioned the need for teacher training. Only one talked about providing professional development opportunities for teachers. 11 mentioned teachers, but none of them mentioned engaging with teachers or consulting with teacher unions when designing and evaluating climate education policy and curricula. And even worse, we found that the countries most responsible for the climate crisis were not talking about climate change in their nationally determined contributions. So in general, we found the countries that were least responsible for present day emissions, countries with the lowest carbon emissions, and countries most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change were more likely to be the ones who were mentioning climate change education as a strategy in their nationally determined contributions. So there's not enough recognition of the importance of education and the role it can play. I've already spoken in the opening remarks about obstacles that teachers find on a daily basis. They want to teach about climate change. They want to engage with students on this issue, but often they just don't have the supporting conditions to enable them to do so. So what can we do? We need to keep pushing. We need to call for education ministers, finance ministers, environment ministers to work together to make bolder commitments and to actually implement these commitments. We need to continue with things like this, coming together as a global movement, having strong, clear, unified demands. Teachers are using their position as stakeholders that have the opportunity to engage in social dialogue, to discuss climate issues, to bring these issues to the table when they are in dialogue with the government. And we need to continue working in partnership. So I think students and teachers in particular acting together, calling for quality climate change education, we're really powerful when we come together and we make our voices heard.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So finance, lack of political view, not enough recognition of the role of education as one of the challenges we are facing. And even though teachers are willing, but the environment is not there, it's not enabling. Thank you very much. And our second question, I would like Laura to answer this question. And this question is from Muhammad Al-Not, one of our delegates from Lebanon. And they are asking, how can youth activists collaborate with educational institutions to drive meaningful change in the climate education curricula? So I will read it again. How can youth climate activists collaborate with educational institutions to drive meaningful change in climate education curricula?
I will say that like besides like collaborating with educational institutions, it's needed also as youth activists, youth organizers, like to organize ourselves and like to understand like right now the education doesn't give us all the knowledges. That's for example one thing about English and like Western, like it just see like in Spanish at least you can say knowledge in plural. In English you cannot, there's just one knowledge. But yeah, that's the thing, like there is not just one knowledge, like there are a lot of things that you need to learn, a lot of things that the curriculum, the program doesn't give you, especially for those who are not like inherently part of like the core of the, yeah, like the hegemonic education. So yeah, I will say that first, organize to understand what is lacking, what do you need to learn, what the education programs are not giving to you, and to look for that education. Like that education is like, I speak like as a Colombian, like that education is already in our land, like it's in the elderly, in our grandmothers, grandparents, in our dads, but it's just like it's seen as something of the past or something that is not important anymore. And I think that is very important, like just to bring back that knowledge that education system doesn't give us. And like at the same time, I will say that there is a lot of youth that has like the privilege like to study, whether it's in like high school or school or like university. And I will say that look for allies within the schools, the universities, to start like challenging a bit the classrooms, the topics that are and the dynamics also that are that are within the classroom, and like to start proposing. I will say, like, if you look for allies, like there are a lot of people that are gonna hear you, listen to you. So yeah, like little by little, but yeah, it would be like to be in those two fronts.
Thank you very much for the answer, Laura, that education is already something like in our land, in our mothers, in our elderlies, and we just need to pass it on. And that youths can start from their classes in the universities and challenge what is being taught in their classroom. So I also want to hear from Christine on this question. So how can youth climate activists collaborate with educational institutions to drive meaningful change in climate education curricula?
Great, thank you. So I think there are 3 key things that youth activists can do to collaborate with education institutions to encourage more and better climate communication and education. The first is to know your context. This involves figuring out at what level is curriculum set in my country and who do I need to work with to affect change. For instance, some countries set curricula at the national level, while some set it at the state level. In some cases, schools or school districts can make their own local adaptations to the curriculum based on state or national standards. It can also be helpful to research if there are organizations in your area or country that are already working on climate communication and education who can provide support. Finally, it's helpful to think about locally and culturally relevant framings of climate change issues that will resonate with your target audience. For instance, if the policymakers you want to target are concerned with preparing students for their future careers, then a framing related to the potential of green jobs may be helpful. Second, it's important to know what you want. This can involve researching how the curriculum in your country engages with climate change and how the current approach may differ from the research on quality climate communication and education. You can ask questions such as, does the curriculum focus too much on gaining a cognitive understanding of climate change? Is climate change only included in science classes? And are justice and Indigenous knowledges included in the curriculum in relation to climate change? Third, once you have collected this information, it's important to work with others to develop messaging and to strategize how to best relay that message to policymakers. This can include looking for networks in your country and organizing with other youth. For example, in Australia, the Seed Indigenous Youth Climate Network plays a vital role in raising public awareness of climate issues. Knowing your context, knowing what you want, and working with others are key strategies youth activists can use to drive meaningful change in climate communication and education curricula. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that succinct and direct answer, Christine. So for youth to be involved and to influence climate education, you need to know your context, your particular region, the context of climate education there. Then you need to know what you want, and then you collaborate with others. So this next question, I also want to hear from Christine as well. He's from Henry Sawyer, one of our delegates from Indonesia. And they're asking, okay, so we don't have much time left for this section. So delegates from Indonesia are asking, how can the integration of indigenous and local knowledge in climate education contribute to a more holistic and culturally sensitive approach? And again, how can the integration of indigenous and local knowledge in climate education contribute to a more holistic and culturally sensitive approach to addressing climate change?
Great, thanks. So holistic climate communication and education must include a justice-oriented focus that acknowledges how Indigenous and local communities are often affected the most by climate change, and that they are important leaders in advocating for and modeling alternative practices. Making these connections support students in seeing the disproportionate effects of climate change and the multiple layers of solutions needed, while also illustrating they are not alone in the fight for climate action. Across the research conducted by the MEIS project, Indigenous knowledge and justice issues consistently receive minimal focus in education policy. Only 44% of countries in the MEIS project country profiles indicate that Indigenous peoples are a key audience for climate communication and education initiatives. There are, however, some bright spots. For instance, Ecuador incorporates the ancestral term Sumak Kwaswe, meaning the good or plentiful life, into its national development plans, climate change strategies, and constitution. Our case studies have illustrated in Ghana, Indonesia, and India that it is possible to develop approaches to climate communication and education that are meaningful and culturally relevant by asking local and Indigenous peoples about their worries, interests, and information needed to support further engagement on climate communication and education. When local and Indigenous knowledge is included in the curriculum, it should be done so meaningfully. This starts with thinking about whose knowledge counts when developing climate communication and education, and making sure diverse voices are included. Inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and priorities in education policy can also include validating and respecting place-based Indigenous knowledge, recognizing and valuing Indigenous understandings of what constitutes quality education, understanding and addressing the impacts of natural resource extraction on Indigenous peoples, and recognizing that Indigenous land-based education is sustainability and climate change education. For more about how climate communication and education can meaningfully include a focus on Indigenous and local knowledge, I recommend checking out a recent blog on our website, which describes the relationship between climate change and colonialism and how education can work towards greater climate justice. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Christine. And you can go to the website to check on that. So this next question is for Usman, and then if you can be brief because we are running out of time. But the question is, what are the key leverage points for enabling countries to mobilize funding and resources to advance climate education? I'll read again. What are the key leverage points for enabling countries to mobilize funding and resources to advance climate education?
Thank you very much, David. Again, countries must have a strong understanding of their capacity and financing needs for climate action, both at the local and national level. This includes developing donor intelligence by comprehending the key players, partners, and funders of climate action. With this knowledge, countries can create bankable projects that attract financing from commercial and development banks. Accessing more financing is crucial for countries to implement climate education initiatives. Furthermore, building success stories on climate education can serve as a powerful tool for countries to showcase their achievements. By highlighting the positive outcomes and impacts of their climate education program, countries can enhance their access to financial and technical resources. These success stories can attract further support, enabling countries to expand their climate education efforts and make a strong case for continued investment. Mobilizing funding and resources for advancing climate education require a strategic and comprehensive approach that involves policy alignment, partnerships, innovative financing, public advocacy, and a strong commitment to integrating climate education into broader national and international agenda. From the Islamic Development Banks, we offer a comprehensive suite of financial products that empower member countries in their developmental pursuit. These products include grants, loans, concessional financing, technical assistance, Islamic finance instruments, green financing, investment funds, capacity building initiatives, risk mitigation instruments, and innovative financing approaches. Through these offerings, the bank supports a range of projects, fosters economic growth, promotes sustainability, and strengthening member countries' capacities, aligning with its mission to drive positive change and advance inclusive development. In addition, establishing a dedicated funds at the national or regional level, specifically earmarked for climate education, can encourage governments and donors to allocate resources for their purpose. These funds can be used to support curriculum development, teacher training, educational materials, and climate-related projects. Governments and other organizations can offer grants and funding through competitions focused on climate education innovations and projects. This approach encourages educators, researchers, and community groups to develop impactful climate education initiatives. This leverage point was used by ISDB in collaboration with ILO through a challenge call on green skilling, where 3 winners were financially rewarded and mentored in implementing their projects for a greener future. And finally, the capacity development of member countries is a crucial leverage point for increasing their access to financing for climate action. By enhancing project implementations, improving project design and proposal development, strengthening policy frameworks, establishing robust monitoring and evaluation systems, fostering institutional collaborations, and promoting knowledge sharing, countries can effectively attract financing support investing in capacity development not only enables countries to access finance, but also long-term resilience in their climate action efforts, facilitating the implementation of effective projects and the achievement of climate goals. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much for that answer, Usman. So for countries to access climate education finance, they need to show the success stories of climate education in their countries. So that marks the end of our quality climate education panel. Thank you again to our speakers for lending us, our brilliant speakers for lending us their time and expertise. We have learned so much and we look forward to working together again. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. We hope that you have enjoyed this as much as us. Delegates, you can now join the regional breakout rooms for another discussion on the draft statements and amendments. For those joining online, that is a wrap for the day, for day one. Please join us again tomorrow at 10 a.m. UTC for our day two welcome. Don't forget to share your thoughts and experiences at the mock EMS on social media. Tag mockup on Twitter, Instagram, and use the hashtags mock EMS and hashtag climate education. Thank you very much.